I am so excited to welcome back Elizabeth Cutler. And for 9 weeks we said the founders of SoulCycle are coming. The founders of SoulCycle are coming. We're all fired up. Well, the weather had other plans. So as I wrote to you this afternoon, Julie was unable to get out of New York, and she's bummed. But we hope that they'll come back another time and be our guests as a team. I got to meet them earlier last year. And I've always been fascinated by the story, fascinated by the brand, what made it so different and so powerful and sort of unique in so many ways. So I want to bring up Elizabeth in a second and give a talk or have her talk about her path and how they built SoulCycle and what she's doing now. So Elizabeth is an entrepreneur best known for co-creating the fitness phenomenon SoulCycle. Elizabeth served as co-CEO at SoulCycle from 2006 to 2015 before becoming co-chief creative officer in 2015. Elizabeth and her partner Julie Rice started SoulCycle in 2006 in the rear lobby of an Upper West Side dance studio found on Craigslist. They grew the company to 60 studios at founders, CEOs, and creative officers before departing in 2016. They were honored as one of Goldman Sachs 100 Builders and Innovators in 2014 and 2013. SoulCycle was voted one of the world's most innovative companies. The list of achievements and awards are long. They were contributing editors to the Wall Street Journal's Accelerators column. And in 2016, they sold the company in what year?
What year is it now? Yeah,
2015. In 2015, and they formed a company called Life Shop, which is an umbrella company focused on advising, investing, and incubating new ideas rooted in the community and emotional intelligence, so it fits in with our performance science. The pair speaks at CEO Business and Creativity conferences worldwide. Let's take a look at their work before we get started. This is SoulCycle. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's so great to see you.
It's so good to have you here, and your daughter Nina, wherever she disappeared to, she just blended into the class.
Right here. Yeah.
Oh, Nina,
Hi.
hello. Nina's a sophomore in high school, so we're recruiting her. So
it's not hard. Last time we came in and out. I think we just saw the street. And so Nina and I walked around before we met up with Dave, and we had you guys were psyched here. It's pretty awesome.
It's not a bad place to be. She just walked through cinema, athletics, and she talked with Coach Helton, who sprained his knee in practice yesterday. He's walking around in sandals, but got a good overview of what makes USC special. So we hope Nina will be back in 2 years. But back to you. We're always recruiting.
I like that. You got to always keep the hustle.
That's right. What do you say? I mean, for us to see that, I'm just getting pumped up and jacked, thinking sort of what it would be like in the SoulCycle training session. But what do you see what do you feel when you see that?
So Julie, she's really sorry that she can't be here. She, there's some crazy storms happening in New York this year, and tonight is one of them. So she was really sorry to be here, that she couldn't be here. And Julie and I are still really close. We met 5 months before we opened SoulCycle at the best blind date that either one of us had ever had. And when I see that, I just think about what it's like to have a love child with somebody that's actually a business, and just how much we put into it, and how much we just loved going to work every single day, and how much we loved every single person that we worked with, and how that love just became this virtuous circle that touched a lot of people, and what a privilege it was to get to build a company like that. And I haven't seen that video in a really long time, and it was great to see. So thank you for giving me that.
Thank you for for building the company and sharing it with all of us. How many people have been to a SoulCycle workout? Look at that.
Wow.
Way to go. How many still go regularly? All right. And so you will know this better than I. What makes that community so different? Because there are plenty of spinning classes. There was cycling before, there's cycling after, but something just caught fire about this.
Yeah.
What was the secret sauce?
Well, it's never one thing, it's always 100 things. I think that I'm sure you talk to a lot of people who validate that. And everybody, two things when we started the business. First of all, one of our best friends who now lives in Malibu was like, I did not have the heart to tell you that spinning is dead and that you should not start this business, which is obviously not true because everybody needs cardio. But the other thing is that I think, we just wanted people to feel different when they feel different walking out the door than they did when they walked in the door. And so we really challenged ourselves to see what it would be like to have friendly people always greet you at the front desk and try to anticipate your needs and make sure that you were cared for. And then when you get into the rooms, that's where we really started to think about what is the experience, the physical, the mental, the musical, the spiritual, the emotional experience that we wanted people to get in a short period of time that could matter to them, so that they were checking a lot of boxes in their lives. And I think when you do that, you create a lot of commonality, and you start these conversations with the community that are like, oh my God, did you hear that song? And it leads to this kind of familiarity that builds this trust. And when you start building trust with the tribe, you start to see these incredible ways in which people become there for one another. And that's what happens in these SoulCycle communities. It's the most incredible thing to me.
It really is. You tap into so many sort of like primal needs, not just the workout and the cardio and all, but you talked about the tribe. And we had Brene Brown here last year.
You guys are so lucky.
It's not bad.
I mean, seriously, I heard the lineup today and I was like, wow, all right, it's like to be here.
They're the big part of it, that's great atmosphere they create. But Brene, wrote a book and talked about belonging and the importance of it. Yeah. And it's on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's psychologically so. Yeah. And you go to the gym, what makes you go to the gym? If you're accountable to somebody, if you have a workout partner, you have a trainer, but yours is even more encompassing than that. Like it's such a community. So like, was that part of the initial vision to like really make people feel like they're part of something and belong to something?
Oh, definitely, for sure. But remember, we're dealing with cynical New Yorkers here, so our promise was like calorie burn, period. And you just have to start with people's baseline. You have to first start with the vanity, and then you can get to the deeper stuff. And once we sort of earned the trust of the community of providing classes that people felt like they were getting a fantastic workout, and they were pushing themselves much harder physically than they ever thought they would on their own, that we could help people kind of get to a different place emotionally and inside themselves. And to me, I always sort of, and I've been thinking about this for a long time, especially in leaving SoulCycle, to try to think about, a couple of things around, like, what is the secular place that you can go to when you're having this human experience that is a challenge, that doesn't feel good, or that's something that's heartbreak, right? I mean, like, and for me, I really wanted a place like that, not only for myself, but for people, for everybody. To go, because historically, we've always had these places that we could go that were temples or churches or mosques or whatever, and still, obviously, some people do that. But as we become much more secular as a culture, we have this need to be able to belong and to feel like there's a safe space where we can work our shit out on the bike, in our case. And I'm sorry, I curse. I hope I don't offend anybody. My husband finally told me that he read something that shows that it's a sign of intelligence, so that's fantastic, because it means that I can really continue to do it. But for me, and I think for everybody, I mean, the idea of having a place that you can go, well, I guess one story that kind of really articulates this well is it was in West Hollywood. It was our first anniversary, and Julie and I were so thrilled that we were still in business. Because a friend of ours had told us that we would never be able to take what we had created in New York and move it across country if we weren't there. So we had to work really hard, and we were really scared, but we made it happen, which was great. And we were standing in the front lobby talking to people, and people will come up to us and say, oh, I lost 15 pounds this year, but that's not it. That's not what really happened. What really happened is, and then people go on to talk about what really happened. And their sister was sick, or their mom died, or their boyfriend that they had been super in love with and had broken up, or their just things that happen in life. And people were able to be in that room and feel stronger, or grieve, or just feel like find their own inner badass, and like just move on, like pick it up and move on. And I don't know. I think that's what we really wanted to deliver in SoulCycle, but we had to, like I said, we had to start with the vanity first.
Let's just quickly sort of go back and talk a little bit about your background, and then we'll dive back into SoulCycle. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? how big of a family, what your parents do for work. Just give us a little sort of snapshot of your family.
I'm a Midwesterner, so I like your Rochester. Who's a Rochesterian accent. I grew up outside Chicago. Both my parents were entrepreneurs. My dad was a commodities trader. He was not well suited for that business at all. I promised myself when I was 8 years old I would never be a trader. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and then she woke up at 40 and realized that she needed things like money, and went and decided to get into the real estate business, and she became the top producer in the Chicago area for 30 years. And she really kicked some butt. I have a brother who's he does TV, and he's an amazing guy. And we grew up outside of Chicago, in Lake Forest, which is super preppy. I got out of there as fast as I could. No disrespect to anybody from Lake Forest. Very nice place, super beautiful, a lot of nice people, but I needed to get out, and that's what I did. I went to University of Colorado.
What brought you there?
I randomly applied to college there. I thought I was going to go someplace else, and I ended up square dancing with some guy one summer who went to University of Colorado, and I needed to apply to some other school. I figured, well, I might as well go there. He seems nice. So that's how I ended up at University of Colorado. I should call that guy and thank him. He really changed my life.
It's so funny because, like, for this generation that, like, you know, it's pretty mapped out. It's pretty, you know, I don't say regimented, but they know about what schools and things like that. If you don't have people in your family that have done it before you, they're not as organized as you are. So I sort of came out here on a whim too, and it turned out to be the greatest decision I've made. But it's just like one of those things where, like, you know, back then it wasn't as scientific and probably nearly as competitive as it is now. Oh, so you go to Colorado. What'd you study?
Well, this goes to SoulCycle. I studied art history and religious studies. I made my own major, which made me really impressed by USC. You can make your own major. And I loved it. I really loved it. I lived in India for a semester, and then I studied art in Taiwan, and it made me have an appreciation for different cultures and the way that people see things differently, and tap into what matters to them and express that in art. And anyway, so yes, that's what I did.
And so
I loved it.
what'd you do after school? Where'd you move to, and what'd you start doing?
That's a great question. This is where I miss Julie, because she worked in Hollywood, and it's so fantastic and interesting. And it was very interesting to me, but I'm not sure this will be that interesting to you guys. So I was going to become an investment banker, and I went to go interview at investment banks, and my stomach was churning, and I couldn't get my contacts in my eyes, and I called my mom who put me through college, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, I can't take these jobs. And she was like, what? And so I didn't take those jobs, and I ended up super randomly moving to southwestern Colorado. Has anybody ever heard of Telluride?
Sure.
Oh, we got one back. Yeah, okay. So I moved to Telluride, and I lived there for 10 years, and I sold real estate, and I started practicing something called Jinshin Jitsu, which helps to restore the energetic pathways in the body. Super esoteric, but one of the best things I've ever found in this lifetime, and still practice it every day on myself. And so I did that for 10 years, and then I randomly, to the point of random, met a guy who was on a ski vacation, who is now my husband, and we've been together for 19 years and have 2 children that we really like a lot, and we live in New York City. So that's us. And when I moved to New York, it freaked me out because I really liked this guy, but I had this enormous community, and I think this is where SoulCycle really came from inside me, was that when I used to walk down the street and tell you, you live in a small town, you're like, listen, there's a few people you're like, I'm avoiding that person, but mostly the more that you know people, the more that you love them. And so I walked down the street, I'm like, oh my God, I love that person. Oh, that person's so great. Oh, I love that person. I love that person. And you know, of all different ages, of all different backgrounds and things. And then when I got to New York, I was looking at Al, I'm like, I super like you a lot, but all I have is you. I don't have anybody else. I don't have a community. So I think subconsciously I wanted to rebuild that community where I felt like I could walk in and feel like I just loved everybody there.
You can't walk down the street in New York and tell people you love them?
You know what, I'm getting to that point. I am definitely getting to that point, but I think that would be a huge embarrassment to the children that I like so much.
What a difference in sort of outward appearance between New York and Telluride.
Yeah, for sure.
And so when you moved back to New York, what did you start doing there?
Well, I started practicing Jinshin Jitsu, and I got pregnant and had 2 kids and gained a lot of weight. I mean, it was crazy how much weight I gained when I was pregnant. It was not right. And no, I'm serious, it was not. And then after these kids were born, my mom was like, don't worry, 2 weeks, you know, I was back in my clothes. I'm like, 2 weeks, great, that's fine. I can wear Alan's clothes for 2 weeks, I'm cool. And 6 weeks later, I'm still wearing Alan's clothes, and I'm like, things are not okay. And my best girlfriend, who I grew up with, was like, what is the matter with you? Like, have you never read a women's magazine? You have to get cardio. You need cardio if you want to get rid of these 60 pounds that are living on your body. They're never going away. And I was like, okay, I'll do cardio. So she took me to a spin class, and I had a revelation on the bike.
When you say a revelation, it's just you fell in love with?
No, I didn't fall in love with it. I was like, I could do this. Like, if I could do this, seriously, anybody can do this. And like, this is great exercise, and people need exercise. People need cardio, and I hate cardio. I hate to work out. I actually hate exercise. But if I could figure out a way to make exercise something that people could like and even look forward to and plan into their week, now that would be pretty fantastic, and I could go too. And then that would really, you know, then I wouldn't be 60 pounds overweight, and you know, I'd get myself together.
So it truly was on a bike you had the aha moment that I could make a business out of this? Or did you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it planted, in fairness, I think a seed was planted inside my head. And then I went to go look for that class that I wanted to take, and I couldn't find it. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. It's Manhattan. I mean, everything's in Manhattan, let's face it. And it wasn't there. I really looked for it. And I thought, okay, well, if I want this, I might as well just do it myself. So then I talked to a teacher. I was like, listen, I really like your class. Maybe I'm going to start the studio. And she said, you should meet this friend of mine. She's talking about starting a studio too. I'm like, really? Great. I'd love to meet her. That was Julie. And that's when we had our lunch, and that's when it started. We were open 5 months later.
So your life has been sort of some pretty fortunate collisions.
Oh, yeah.
You look at that, like, you can't
I got the angels.
Looking out. And yeah, that's... We heard from Payal Kadaki, who started ClassPass, and you know, both you and her and Julie, you know, started as customers first. Like, I need to solve this pain. She couldn't find a dance class. She couldn't schedule a dance class. She couldn't find the spin class she wanted to. So talk about the initial conversation of meeting with Julie, and sort of how you know, were you guys speaking the same language? Were you sharing a mind, or was one saying, I like this and I like something different, or were you guys just sort of on the same page early on?
Well, we really were on the same page early on, and I think, you know, listen, I don't know how many of you are going to be entrepreneurs in here, but having good chemistry with the people that you work with is paramount. And chemistry and work ethic, those two things aligning, you have a chance. If you don't have both of those things, I just think it's really hard. And in fact, we had a third partner, and it did not work out with her, but I wouldn't have met Julie if I didn't know her, so I really appreciate her. Yes, our first meeting was like fantastic. She was like, well, I was thinking this, and then I'd be like, I'd finish the sentence. I didn't even know her. And we just really clicked, and it was a lot of fun.
So did you have was the early vision, granted you probably didn't dream this big, maybe you did. Was the early vision what ultimately evolved, or was the early vision different?
The experience was what ultimately evolved. It was not. The experience from day one was not what we had hoped it would be, as often happens. We had some rogue instructors in the beginning. It was pretty funny. They're no longer obviously teaching at SoulCycle. They didn't last very long. But I think that where we got to, and the way that we helped people, A, the way that we created a platform for people, and B, the way that we allowed them to express this freedom within framework, which is something that we talk about a lot, for people to really tap into their own gifts, to be able to share those with the riders, and be able to say things that don't sound cheesy, to be able to be completely authentic and real in that moment. You know, that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear somebody preaching at me, like, that's annoying. I want to hear somebody who's really like talking about what's raw and what's real, and whether it's global or personal, it doesn't really matter. But to be able to create that kind of environment where people feel safe to share like that took a little bit. But once we got there, you know, it really caught on, and now it's interesting to see how quickly instructors can get it.
So the first studio you open, you know, instructors are everything. You know,
Yeah.
it's so important to when you're rolling out a concept that your first ones, you know, you
Sure.
can't miss. Was could you tell us in sort of a short phrase what either the vision or the concept was?
For the instructors?
No, for was it SoulCycle initially called?
Yeah, it was called
from
SoulCycle. The branding that you see in that film is exactly what we had. We did the yellow wheel from the beginning. Julie and I worked on all the branding together with a friend of ours. And yeah, there was the seeds of the DNA. This is the other thing I think is so interesting. I'm working now with, we can talk about it later, but I'm helping other companies. And one thing that I have learned and just seen, and maybe you guys have talked about, but like the DNA of where you start, like that's your DNA. It's just like this body, like this is my DNA, this is what I have to work with. It's the same thing in business. And fortunately we had interesting, and like I think I really liked our DNA. Like I personally really connected with it, and so did Julie, so we could really iterate on it and allow it to grow and flourish over time. But I would say that, you know, from an instructor perspective, that definitely took a little bit longer, but the bones of it were there for sure.
So if you had to describe the DNA or the core values of the company, you talked about authenticity and creativity. How do you weave those together in a way that if you're going to train instructors or bring coworkers on, that they understand? How would you explain sort of the core values of the company?
I think it really started with, we were not in the gym business, we were in the hospitality business. So if you start at the baseline of that, like that lens allows you to realize like what you have to deliver no matter what your role is. If you're a studio manager, if you are, you know, the COO, if you work in finance, it doesn't matter. Everybody understood that we were all in service of the riders, because obviously none of us would have a job without the riders, and our job was to make that such an amazing experience that they would talk about it and bring friends back.
And so, you know, a fanatical attention to customer service and that they're there first. What other core values did you layer in there that were important? Because you sort of talked about the freedom and creativity and authenticity. Were those explicit, or did you just, or is it the freedom within the framework that you just talked about?
No, I mean, we didn't start out with core values, and I think core values are very important. We realized 5 years into the business that it was time to articulate what had become that organically had become our core values. I don't remember what all 10 of them were, but you know, one of them was like, we are a culture of yes. And that's a fantastic thing, by the way, because if you're in a consumer-facing business, I mean, I know all this stuff is super intuitive to you guys, but trust me, when we started the SoulCycle in 2006, like customer service was really about like how rude you could be to somebody, as opposed to like really helping them get through whatever their issue was. So, you know, making something into a yes, somebody walking in and making sure that they felt that way was pretty important. And not only that, like that's also went to your coworkers, right? So if I said that I needed help with something, it was your job to help me figure that out. I mean, unless it was a stupid request, and you just should tell me, like, that's dumb. So a culture of yes. I'm trying to remember what the other ones were. We get dirty. I hate it when organizations get big and then people are like, oh, that's not my job. I mean, everything is your job. Like, I'm picking up that piece of paper. Everybody's picking up the piece of paper. That was another one. I really liked that one. They'll come to me. I can't remember. But it's that kind of a theme of where people feel responsible for creating a kind of environment. And one of them is like, we have fun. That was another one. We have fun. Like, we have a good time while we're doing this. We work hard, but we have a great time.
And these aren't the things that, you know, everyone talks about mission statement, core values. They're not necessarily the things that you put on the wall with the, you know, the fancy corporate statement, but it's what you live. And, you know, all those things were embodied in the experience, both as an employee and as a customer. We'll talk about your first space in a minute. What did the experts and your friends say about the chances of this thing happening?
Oh, my husband worked in finance. He worked in Lehman Brothers, which was such a great job. You never know what life's going to hold, you guys. You just got to roll with it and have a good attitude. It's a good thing you got all these, what's the other, never mind. But yes, science, the brain science.
Performance science.
Thank you very much. Performance science, I think that's so interesting and excellent that you guys have access to that. Yeah, my husband worked at Lehman Brothers, and he got out on the trading floor that he was investing in a gym business, and he was seriously heckled and mocked for doing that. Nobody ever made any money doing that. You are totally going to lose all your money. People would just give him the hardest time. So yeah, there were naysayers everywhere. And then unfortunately, to the point of like mindset, he started to be like, oh geez, nothing's going to happen here. Like, this is definitely not happening. So he made us a bet, which is so dumb of him. He was like, okay, let me just tell you something. If you guys ever make $10 million I will run naked through East Hampton, New York on a Saturday in July. And this is a man who should not be running naked through East Hampton on a Saturday ever, really. Actually, he's a very nice guy, but that's not right, really a good idea. So when we made $10 million, I was like, well, it looks like July's just around the corner. What's your plan, Stan? And he had such a panic attack about that. He was going to hide clothes in the public bathroom, and he was going to run here, and hoping he didn't get arrested. Unfortunately, we were like, you don't have to come through. You know, okay, this bet we're going to let slide, but the next one, you're going to have to follow through on.
So they're a bit young. What year is this again that you're starting?
2006.
Okay, 2006.
Before you could order anything online, pretty much.
2006. Lehman Brothers is sort of, famous for being a large factor in the economic downturn and the Wall Street collapse. So her husband works at Lehman Brothers, high flying, probably make a ton of money. You have one kid or two kids at the time? Two kids. And we all talk about, is there a perfect time to start a business? This is not an easy time to start a business, right?
I had a 5-month-old. Nina was 3, and our sister was 5 months old. And my husband had a good job. He wasn't like the highest paid person there, but he very, very, super respectable. He had worked there forever and was super good at his job. And I told him I was going to start this, and he was like, you're going to ruin your life. You have no idea. This is a 24/7. This is 24/7. And I'm like, it'll be fine. And he was right, it was 24/7. Yeah. But I have to say that, it was one of those things where I kept on hearing in my own mind, in my own heart, like I needed to start this. And I just felt like if I wasn't listening to that, then what was I really listening to? And I was really grateful when Lehman went bankrupt that this was such an exciting and like wonderful additive thing to my life and to our family's life to be able to do that, because that was a bummer for Alan. It really was.
2008 Lehman collapses.
Yeah. And the way that you get paid there is that it vests. So when you go bankrupt, you lose the last 5 years most of the money you make is in stock. So it's like working for free for 5 years on Wall Street, which is what nobody would do that. Yeah. But he did, and so did a lot of other people.
And
but he's fine now. He's fine.
Yeah, I think family's doing okay. You guys are gonna be okay. Talk about your first studio space, how you found it, and just sort of paint the picture of the first SoulCycle.
So it was 2006, and the banks were taking over New York and all the real estate there, so it was really hard to get space. And we didn't have any credit history, and I couldn't get any brokers to call me back, so I went to Craigslist. And I found this dance studio, and I walked in, and I just was like, oh, this is it. It's super cheap. This is a 5-year sublet. Julie and I talked about it. We figured, like, what can really go wrong? So we did it. I mean, it was pretty easy, actually, compared to the following 59 studios that we built. That was probably the easiest one.
And sort of, did you guys finance it internally, family?
Yeah.
So friends and family? What did you do?
No, so we financed it. I had some stuff that I brought with me from Telluride and Alan, and together we financed it. And Julie was the sweat. And then something really great happened. Our good friends started this company. Have you guys know that sparkling beverage juice called Izzy? Have you ever seen that? IZZE? Yeah. So our friends, my college roommate, nice to your college roommates, she and her husband started that, and it was before everybody was like an entrepreneur and raising money. And I had seen it in Telluride, and I called them, and I was like, you guys, I want to invest in this. And he was like, oh, no. I'm going to lose your money. You cannot do that. Thanks, I love you, bye. And I'm like, okay, that's totally fine. I'm an adult, and you can call me back if you need to. He's like, I will not be calling you back. 3 days later, calls me back. We just got a huge order from Whole Foods. We don't have the cash to fill it. Can you do what you said you were going to do? So we did it. 7 years later, I'm standing in our kitchen. I get a FedEx. I open it. It cost us $250,000 to open the first SoulCycle studio. I rip it open. I pull it out. There's a check in there for $264,000. I start jumping down, up and down and screaming like I have won the lottery, because I actually have. And I super lost my mind. It was the most exciting moment, because Izzy had been sold to Pepsi, and we got a check for the investment that we had made in that business. And at that point, SoulCycle was free to make the decisions that we needed to make. We didn't have to worry about anybody asking us for anything. We could just do what we wanted to do, and we did.
So you financed most of the growth?
And then we financed it. Julie had an envelope that she and her husband lived in a rent-controlled one-bedroom apartment with a toddler. They had moved from Los Angeles, and they quit their job. So Spencer kind of had a job, but Julie quit her job. And every Sunday night, Spencer gave Julie an envelope with cash. She didn't have any credit cards. And when the cash was done for the week, the cash was done. And that's how we started the business, because we were so scrappy. Like, she had a limited amount of cash. I had we all just like rolled up our sleeves and went for it. So I think that was a little bit off topic.
No, that's
and so I lost my train of thought there.
From the beginning, was brand always central?
Yeah.
Because you said the logo and the artwork, you baked it in from the beginning.
Yeah, one of the things that my mom did when she sold real estate and became really successful at what she was doing was she just would feature one house a week in a big ad. And nobody was doing that. She was the first person to ever do that. So everybody always did those really tiny ads. And so it really taught, and there were a number of other things that you sort of pick up cues that just brand is really important. And then, Julia worked in Hollywood, and when she lived here, it was right when J-Lo was like on fire. And they were trying to think about, how do you take a person and turn them into a brand? What do you associate with them to turn them into a brand? So for J-Lo, it was like perfume, I think they did, and a couple of other things as well. And she's had a really long career by thinking of her performance as a brand. Right. So Julie, that was very central for both of us, for sure. And
so what did the brand, did you guys sort of have a brand identity, and did you go through all that?
No, we didn't do, I think there's a real place to do that. I've done that with other companies since, and I think that's a great, to do brand exploration makes a lot of, I get it. We didn't do that. We just iterated until we were like, yep, that's it. That's what it stands for. Maybe one day somebody will see the wheel and they'll think of it as a Nike swoosh. Okay, ladies, whatever. And now we have these big wheels everywhere. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, the yellow wheel is, everyone knows what it is.
Yeah, well, it's because it's like kids who don't have sugar. Our first location did not have any signage. So when we got our second location, it was an obnoxious, biggest wheel I could find that would go on that wall.
And designing the studios, did you bring other people in? Did you guys design it on your own? And how did you and Julie sort of divide roles and responsibilities? And we'll talk about partnerships as well.
So we did a lot together in the beginning, and certainly we did that with design as well. I ended up taking over design of the studios and a lot of the brand stuff, and she worked with instructors and did our retail. And we worked initially with a design build contractor. We just said, do this, do that, do this, do that. And then Julie would say, you know what, I think we should do it. It was just very iterative. We had a lot of fun doing it. So
great stuff. We're dreaming about what type of space we want for this Performance Science Institute, to test and train and all that stuff. And there's some similarities in sort of the type of feeling that you want to create. So we said, let's go to a SoulCycle and look inside, and all the words on the walls. Yeah. What was, did you have a word or words that sort of were your word on the wall?
Well, the graphics, people weren't doing those big graphics the way, things are so graphically saturated right now, but at the time, the athlete, legend, warrior, rock star, that was great because everybody can identify with one of those. And to have a mantra inside the room, when you're kind of spacing out and looking over there and you see a word like, our bodies push us, I can't remember what it says right now, but pushing myself hard, whatever. There's lots of good stuff on that wall. And then when we very first opened, we had the image of the road in the back that was like the symbol of the journey that was reflected in the mirror. All this stuff I really believe in unconscious cues that get you places. And maybe people didn't pick up on that. Maybe they did. I have no idea. But that was the intention behind doing that and the branding.
And it sort of came through in everything you did. You mentioned retail. You guys not just sell classes, but you sell merchandise.
Yeah.
So talk about managing a retail operation, like, you know, I would say how many SKUs, but how many
Oh, I have no
seasons,
idea.
all that stuff.
Well, we did 14 collections a year, which was a lot. And that was just as fast fashion was coming on. So people were like, wow, you know, this looks so different. Because people are in the studio so often, you can't have the same thing for 4 months. You have to change it over every 3-4 weeks, I guess 4 weeks. And then also, we couldn't find good curation of workout wear when we started. And because you sweat so much in those classes, your clothes get super gross. You should have the opportunity to buy new clothes if your clothes are gross. So we just felt like we should make that easy for the people who are walking through the front door. And so that is really why we did it.
Is that right?
And plus, it's great to have, for the brand, to have people walking around wearing things that say SoulCycle on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that became a big part of the business, I assume.
It was a 10% part of the business, yeah.
10%? And again.
But still, a totally legitimate business on its own, for sure.
And what, again, like, this wasn't that long ago, but so many of the things that you did were sort of pioneering in ways, and now they'd be like, yeah, everyone does that now. So like the pay-per-class model, that was unheard of back then.
Yeah.
You joined a gym, you paid a membership, and you spun in there. And your classes aren't cheap. So talk about the contrarian business model and how you developed that.
Yeah, well, that actually was from the very beginning. Well, first of all, I don't like when people try to lock me into things. I find that annoying. So I didn't like the gym membership situation personally. And I really couldn't understand why so many people did that. It just seemed like, I don't know. Everybody talks about how they have gym memberships and they never go. And I just think that's like bad actor. I had an issue with that. And then I realized that the people who were teaching the classes, the reason why the classes sucked at the gyms was because the people who taught the classes were tired. And they were just running around town, picking up one here, 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 and here. And by the time they got to me, like there was just nobody to teach the class. Like they had nothing left inside them. And so I just kind of felt like if we changed the model, right? And we decided that we were gonna pay the instructors more than anybody else, and we were gonna give them full benefits because we cared about them. And we were going to do a pay-per-class model where if somebody comes into the studio, they're going to bring their A game because they're paying to go in that room. You know, they're going to value what they pay for. And if you get 40 people in a room all valuing something, something's going to happen in there. So that is really why we did that. And it was not that easy in the beginning. People didn't really understand why they should pay for something that they got for free at their gym. But over time, people started to understand what was really going on, and they started to value that, and then they started to come.
And that was your strategy from the get-go,
Yeah.
that you were going to charge per class.
Yeah.
Again, it was unique to sort of like schedule, sign up.
Oh, that's what
on
I
your
mean.
Phone, all that stuff didn't really
Well,
exist.
they didn't have the phones. We were still using flip phones in 2006, believe it or not. When did the smartphone start? Anybody know that? Was it 2000?
2008?
8? Whatever. So it wasn't 6. We can say for sure it was not 2006. What we did have was online reservations. So we were the first studio in New York City where you could go online and the reservation system would open. You could plan your fitness week. I mean, that is a joke that I think that is revolutionary sitting here right now. It's hilarious, right? But that was a very big deal at that point.
And what did you find in terms of how many classes does it take before someone goes from, it's all right, to like, this is the greatest thing
3.
ever? 3?
3.
It's the magic number of 3. You've got the data, obviously, on that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Anytime you try a new sport, you're like, what is this equipment? How do I even do this? The second time, you're like, okay, I sort of get it. And the third time, you're like, I got this.
And then again, you have all the data on this. What is a power user? How often do they come in?
I don't have the data on this anymore, but anecdotally, I mean, people were riding doubles 3-4 times a week. I mean, how people were riding 8, 10, 12
No kidding.
times a week. Way more than I was, by the way, ever. I'd be like, oh my God, you did that? Okay, I'm gonna try that.
So talk about the growth of the company as it scaled and your husband's advice of like, does this thing become 24/7 while you have
Yeah, it
kids
was
that
definitely 24/7. The company scaled. We self-funded through the 7th studio, and then we wanted to do more. And we were kind of in a place where, and a lot of, I didn't know this, but do you guys ever talk about this Death Valley where people get to a certain amount of revenue and then they need they need about $3 million?
Oh, in terms of being undercapitalized?
Yeah, undercapitalized. Anyway, so we were undercapitalized by about $3 million. And, you know, Lehman had gone bankrupt. After Lehman had gone bankrupt, I called Alan and I'm like, oh my God, you're so good at managing money. Like, you diversified all those years. There's still money in the bank account and I need to borrow it. And he was like, what? And I was like, I will give you 10% interest and that's really good. And he was like, okay. So we borrowed money from him and then it just started to get to be like absurd. We needed to go out. And it was 2008, 2009. There was really no place to find capital, which is why we ended up doing it. And then we got introduced to Equinox, and those guys wanted to buy a majority of the company. And, you know, Julie was living in a one-bedroom apartment and almost about to get pregnant with her second kid, and it was just time to, you know, sell part of the company. So we did. And in some ways, that took a lot of pressure off of things because you have a partner, and those guys really supported us in, you know, growing the company as fast as we could, and we were psyched because we wanted to do it. So yeah, we started doing, I think, 8 studios the next year, 12 the next year, 15. I mean, we were just like doing as many as we could just to get SoulCycle to the people as fast as we could get it. Was
there any, you know, a new dimension, obviously, when you have a financial partner and someone owns a majority of the business, but were there any conflicts in strategy?
Oh, yeah.
At one point, didn't Equinox have like SoulCycles in their gyms?
No, they never had SoulCycle.
Okay, they were all standalone?
No, they've always been standalone. There were plenty of conflicts. Oh my God, so many. But you know what, I decided that was my role. Like, I was gonna manage that. And we did a good job with that for 5 years, and we, you know, found the right balance there. And I think the one thing that was really exciting actually was building out field teams, building out infrastructure to be able to scale the business and be able to make sure that when people walked into SoulCycle, they felt like it was the only SoulCycle and that they could feel like they were part of a community, that we didn't lose that kind of experience that we had in the initial markets of Los Angeles and New York, and that we could really, you know, create an environment where people could be having a great time at work and therefore be having a great time when people walked in the front door. We really tried to plant those seeds, and I think that DNA still exists today. So I think we did that.
Was there a moment or two when you realized that, like, holy, we're on to something big? You know what I mean? Like, was there a moment, either a customer experience, feedback you got, growth in revenue? What did you see where you said, like, this thing is really scaling at a high rate, or we've got a winner?
That's a really good question. I don't know, maybe because one of our core values was like, get dirty. Like, we were always so dirty in everything that we never often, I mean, we had some crazy experiences, like Lady Gaga, and maybe, I don't know if anybody's a Lady Gaga fan in here, but a lot of people who work at SoulCycle are very big Lady Gaga fans. And she had a birthday party here in West Hollywood, and that was a huge deal. Oprah had her 60th birthday party at SoulCycle. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, what? That was like, I mean, I still get kind of moved by that. And there are a lot of amazing things that would happen. And people getting married, people who met in a studio, going on dates, and then having children together. Like, that is crazy. And it's just, or people who say, like, oh, you know, you never make friends after you get out of college. Your college friends are your college friends, your work friends, but as you get older, you don't make new friends. And they have all new friends, and they're going on vacation together. I mean, that was fantastic. So cool.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's not just, you know, Oprah and Lady Gaga, it's everybody who sort of has a SoulCycle story, and we all have the friends who, they're just so devout. You know, the people who are into it are just so into it, and it took me, you know, the first time I'm just like, I don't get it. Yeah. Second time you're like, okay, it's fun. Mm-hmm. It took me like 4 or 5 times before, like, I'm like, I can do this regularly. Yeah. Because it's just, you know, it's, if you're in the back corner pedaling, you know, you don't feel like you're part of the tribe quite yet, and they're just, you know, they're people that know each other. Like, the whole first or second row seems like they've been there forever, and they're like family. Right.
That's true.
I mean, thanks for inviting me into your class.
Yeah.
But I know I felt the vibe and everything like that, and it's an incredible workout, and obviously you guys sort of baked that in from the beginning. Were there any sort of personal highlights? I mean, I have Oprah and Lady Gaga, but personal highlights along the way that you and Julie really celebrated?
Yeah, when we first hit 20,000 riders in one day, we took a moment to really think about what that means. Because the thing is, the people, it's supposed to be a virtuous circle, right? The instructors are supposed to create an environment where you can find your best self, right? And then the people in the class are supposed to find that, or you don't always have to, obviously. Sometimes you just go in because you ate too much cheesecake last night, and that's fine. But like, if you are really finding something in that room, then that's going to impact somebody else in your life, and then there's just like there's a ripple effect to that, and we really wanted to see that kind of thing. So when we hit 20,000 riders in one day, we just really started to think about like what was going to happen. What could happen? Like, what could happen? And one of the things that happened was, which I think is just as relevant now as it was then, but when we opened in DC, I was like, what will happen when we open in DC? Will Michelle Obama come to ride? Which she did, which was, I mean, that was a huge highlight. And everybody in the West Ring was riding. I mean, seriously, everybody in the West Ring was riding in SoulCycle. Like, I'm vomiting in the corner. I'm so excited about that. But there were these two people who had been riding together. They were just SoulCycle friends. They didn't know anything about about their own lives, but they both knew that they had Veterans Day off. So they made a date to go ride together for Veterans Day. And it turns out that they started talking about what each of them did for a living and the kind of political views that they had after the class. They had known each other for a year and a half. They never had this conversation, which is pretty awesome, right? They just knew each other as like sweaty people. Yeah. Super great leveling field. It turns out that she works for an incredible, like, super, like, anti-gun, liberal, like, organization in DC, and he basically works for, like, a think tank that supports the NRA. Now, what is the chance that those two people are going to become best friends in Washington, DC? I'm going to tell you, 0.1. SoulCycle got to be the 0.1. So that was a really incredible, I mean, and for them to talk about it, like they talk about it, it was pretty incredible.
You must get
That blew my mind. Actually, that didn't blow my mind. I was so grateful to the creator that happened, because that was a wish that I had, and it's nice to see your wishes come true.
And sometimes your wishes even turn out to be better than what you even thought of. I'm sure this is even bigger. When you hit 20,000 riders in a day, what size were you in terms of number of stores? And did you guys grew it, before selling it, you grew it to what, 59,
60 locations, okay. 59, 60, I think it was 60.
So is today, like any given day, they have, how many rides do they have in a day, do you know?
Nobody sends me the GMR anymore, I have no idea.
Not on that
I have no idea. I can't remember exactly how many studios we had. All I remember is I was pretty psyched that day.
So you had 60 studios, like 1,500 employees.
Yeah.
How did you like that part of having that many employees? And none of this will be on the web before you say it's okay, so you can say whatever you want.
Yeah, no, I actually really liked having, I feel like I felt proud to be able to create what I thought were good jobs. Because I think there's a lot of shitty jobs out there, and I think that people who create shitty jobs should be held accountable for creating them. Because I think people should make good jobs and make a good environment for people to live in. I'm super utopian, obviously. But I liked that. The part that I didn't like was my kids. I mean, it's like I would take 3 hours off for a birthday party. Oh my God, Elizabeth, we have to talk. There's been fraud on the bank account. You're the only one that can clear it. You have to call the bank right now. It didn't matter, what was going on. If any family time that I had carved out, like something always happened during that time, and that was fine, and everybody rolled with it. But it started to get to be a little tiresome.
Yeah, I mean, we have that scope of responsibility with that many employees. You're managing a lot of people more than the business. And how did you guys divide up sort of the responsibilities?
Yeah, so Julie did the retail and the instructors, and I just did everything else. So it was finance, it was legal, it was construction, it was HR, it was like all the unsexy stuff. I was like, I'll just deal with it. I'm good with it, and I'll take care of that. And
let's talk about choosing a partner. You talked about meeting her and sort of having sort of sharing a mind and a vision right from the beginning. A lot of people go into business for themselves. I've had partners.
Yeah.
You're an advocate of having a partner. Why?
Well, I like having a partner because I always think that 1 + 1 is more than 2. But you first of all, like I said, same work ethic and the same kind of vision is, I think, really important. You can't have the exact same skill set because then nobody knows how to do the other stuff that needs to get done. If you are going to take a partner, try to find a business coach because something is going to go wrong. It's like therapy in a relationship or whatever it is. Like, you've got to find the tools to be able to work through stuff and do active listening, or try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to be able to get through whatever's, an obstacle, because stuff does happen. That was a huge part of us growing together as a company, and we learned these skills. People don't walk into stores with their best selves. They do not. They walk into their stores often with their worst selves. They had a bad day and they want to take it out on the person who's behind the front desk. The person who's behind the front desk is 22 years old, and nobody has ever taught them about how to manage somebody's anger, right? So Julie and I worked behind the front desk, and we realized that there were lots of tools that we needed to develop, not only very quickly and very adeptly for ourselves, but we needed to share those very quickly with the people that we were asking to work for us, and we did that. So if you have the discipline of working with somebody to help you evolve with the business issues that you have, then you'll be able to share those better with the people that come to work for you, and it's very powerful if you do that.
I'm sure you're careful and purposeful about the type of people you wanted to hire, particularly for those sort of frontline jobs, but it's also intensive training. You don't just turn them loose and just hey, you got a good personality, you'll know how to deal with this. So, training that many people is a massive exercise.
It definitely was. And we worked with somebody who was in that video, Amy Peck, who's just incredible person. But I also think, those kinds of people self-select once you start to get the right kind of vibe in there.
Yeah, you attract like-minded people, kindred spirit there.
That's
so
right.
I'm joining you. So what are some of, you've stepped aside from the company. Talk about sort of what's happening now in your life and why it's very different than what you were doing a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it is very different. Well, right now we're on a family sabbatical. You guys are our off-ramp for our family sabbatical. Nina and I really needed to eat some sushi, and there's not good fish in Telluride because it's way up in the mountains. So we had a delicious lunch. So thank you very much for that. We decided that I'm kind of being sort of cheeky about it, but after we left SoulCycle, it was pretty intense. We just went off the cliff. Julie she almost needed a straight jacket. It's funny, but it's not funny, but it's totally true, but it's actually funny. And so she was literally gonna gnaw her arm off if she didn't get back in it. She's like a shark that needs to feel water going over her gills. And I had what a lot of people at my age experience. Both of my parents got sick within 9 months of each other, and I was like, I can't start another business and deal with my family. And I just spent 12 years building this big company. And I always joke with the kids, I feel like I gave them a credit card and I'm like, don't worry, I'll be back in 10 years, it's gonna be fine. And they were fine, thank God. I could never have done that if they weren't the people that they were. But I just didn't feel like I just couldn't look myself in the mirror and go start another company with my parents being in the position that they were. So Julie and Spencer tried, and Spencer is Julie's husband, and we worked with him for a long time. He was our CMO. He was in the video. He's brilliant. They both are. And so they worked on starting something new. And Julie got a job offer from WeWork. Actually, they wanted us to come together, and I just couldn't do it. So Julie's working at WeWork, and it's a really interesting place for her to be. And I have had a really interesting year getting my mom set up. She has Alzheimer's, so I've been really learning about the brain and about what I can do to keep myself in my best self now when I'm young and can break some habits and learn a lot about that, which is really fascinating, all the research around what is happening with the mind. So I love that you guys are doing this. I think it's incredible. And then my dad was sick and passed away. So, I just felt like I needed some time. And so my husband, Nina's 15, and she's a sophomore in high school, and he was like, you can't take a kid out of school junior year, so like second semester sophomore year is the last minute you can do this. So that's what we're doing. So we're living in Telluride, and we're skiing, and there was no snow, and my husband woke up one morning, and he was like, it's snowing in Japan. Do you think we should go to Japan? And I was like, I don't know when else we're going to Japan. So we went and skied powder in Japan in January, and that was super awesome. So we're living our dreams right now, and I've got 4 companies that I'm working with because I just felt like I needed to keep that part of my brain alive, and it's been really fantastic. One of them is The Wing. I don't know if you guys have heard of that yet. They'll be coming to Los Angeles. It's so incredible. Unfortunately, it's just for the ladies in the audience, but the women who started it are beyond, and it is a privilege to work with them, and I'm like a bat phone for the CEO and COO. And she's just been helping them with lots of stuff. I see someone nodding. They're fantastic. And then I'm working with Urban Stems, which is a direct-to-consumer flower brand. They're a little bit later stage, and that's been really interesting. And then 2 other companies. One hasn't launched yet. It's a acupuncture studio where you can go and get acupuncture as you feel the need. And that'll be really interesting. It's called Within. It's going to launch in the fall in New York. And then the last company is called Nosy, which is a short form video like lynda.com.
Okay.
2.0.
So not all centered around health and wellness, somewhere?
No, not really. I mean, the acupuncture thing I did selfishly because I hurt my hip last summer, and I was like, this is super annoying. I just need somebody to like help me feel better. Maybe if I could just go get acupuncture and just do it on my phone, it would make it easier. And somebody introduced me to these people, and they're actually really great. So. That's what I'm up to. That's what my sabbatical looks like. I take phone calls, and I make breakfast sometimes. I cook.
For you.
I paint. I meditate 21 minutes a day. It's life-changing. Do people meditate? Do you guys meditate? I'm just telling you guys, like, I meditated when I was your age, and then I fell off the wagon, and I'm back on it, and it is legit. Like, I am obsessed with it. So I think it's cool that you do that.
Do it in the morning, at night? When do you do your
the morning
practice? Sort of right as you get out of bed or in bed, or some breathing, get out?
A little bit morning-ish time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Breathing routine?
What's that?
Is it a breathing routine?
It's just being quiet I couldn't do it for 21 minutes, and my college roommate came to town, and she said, I'm doing it for 21 minutes, you should do it. So I was like, oh, I can do it for 21 minutes. And so it is breathing, and it's looking, what I do is I look for, I'm sure there's lots of ways of meditating, obviously, but I'm looking for the space behind the thoughts, to rest in that space behind my thoughts.
That's sort of where you find the most creativity, and it's interesting to hear you sort of purposefully making time for that. And then the other part I want them to all realize is, like, a lot of people are, oh, I need to be an entrepreneur. I got to be an entrepreneur. I got to get back in. You know, going into a conference room with your friends and a whiteboard and saying best idea before Saturday wins is a terrible way to start a business. It really is. And so, like, you know, to sort of do your personal inventory, and like, it is so hard to start an operating company, to start and grow an operating company. It takes 10 years before you even know if you got a winner. And so for you to say, like, I don't have it in me right now to run and start an operating company, it's just like, you don't want to go in halfway. You're going to get pounded if you go in halfway. So it's great that you knew yourself enough, and that at this point in your career, you know, you shouldn't have to start anything from scratch. You can take a piece from so many people that are looking for your expertise and guidance, and you can really help grow things that already have a little bit of inertia. So if you tell us your criteria, you know, we'll try and send you some people on the West Coast and see if there's anyone that might fit for you. But I want to open it up to questions. So
I will say, though, that I think starting a business is a calling.
Yes.
You know, it's like, you know, if you're not getting the call, you know, go get a job and like learn some fantastic, amazing skills from other people. I really feel strongly like it's a calling.
Yeah, a friend of mine said, you know, you don't choose your business, it chooses you. And once it chooses you, you don't really.
Oh,
you're in.
Yeah,
you use different terms, but it's just like it's really true. Once you're in, you're in, and you talked about it as being like a child to you, your love child, and everything, and it is such a, you know, an all-in endeavor.
Oh, here's a great story. I'll just say this is funny. 2.5 years into the business, people are calling us to franchise. And we're like, oh, I don't know anything about franchising. Maybe we should franchise. We should take this meeting. So we meet this guy. He's from the south side of Chicago. He's about my mom's age. Everybody on the south side of Chicago knows each other. So I call my mom. I say, Mom, I just met with this really interesting guy, and he does franchising, and do you know him? And she's like, no, I don't know him. And we finish our conversation. I hang up. The phone rings 3 minutes later. She's like, Elizabeth, did you Google him? And I said, no, I did not Google him. She's like, well, I just did. And he just got out of the federal penitentiary for tax evasion. So what do you think about doing business with the person who just got out of jail? And I was like, okay. You got to Google everyone. Thanks, Mom. Bye. This is really, really
Good
fun.
lesson from your mother.
Yeah.
I want students to ask questions. Do you have a microphone for the students? Questions for Elizabeth?
Thank you, Elizabeth, for coming in today. My question is, what's the importance of pricing to create the ultimate brand perception for the customer and charging $33 instead of $23?
Right, okay, so we started with 27. I wish I could tell you that we analyzed it and we had some really smart people from Bain who came in and did a market analysis and a bunch of research about the psychology of numbers, and we did not do that. We just picked numbers that made sense based on our costs really of creating this product and having to build out these spaces and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sorry, I really wish I had a better answer for you, but I don't.
Thank you.
But there are a lot of people who are good at that.
All right. Thank you for coming. So you started in 2006 and you ended in 2015. So roughly around 9 years. Something that you spend so much time on. Do you still have any role, or do you even care about how SoulCycle runs right now, even though you have no responsibility for it?
Yeah. That's a great question. I will say two things. One, when you start something, it's always in your heart. It's like when I left, it was like leaving a piece of my heart, of course, because, something that's touched me that much and that touched other people that much, like that, you can't turn that off. Like, that's just real. And the second thing I will tell you is that in America, when you sell something, it is no longer yours, right? So you have to remember that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much for coming. You just said that starting business is like calling. I was wondering, when you have that calling, what are the first steps to do? Or I guess going back to 2006 when you got that calling,
Yeah.
what were the first things you did before even like getting your own studio at Craigslist?
Yeah.
Yeah, what were the steps?
That's a great question. So the way to get it done is to just make a list and start getting it done and hold yourself accountable. I'm taking care of these 5 things today. I don't care if it takes me till midnight, I'm getting them done. And if I can't get this done, because circumstances happen, these 2 move down, 2 more things move up. You just have to do stuff every day to manifest your dream. And if you do that and you work with people who are aligned in that vision, you will get it done. You absolutely will get it done.
Quick follow-up. Do you know if it's possible to do it while you're studying, or do you think it should be like a full-time?
I mean, I didn't do that, so I can't say that. But I mean, people spend a lot of time watching Netflix. I mean, you just cut your Netflix in half, and then you probably can get it done.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I was wondering if you could talk about expansion a little bit. I've been to studios in a few different regions like New Jersey and New York and here, and they all sort of have different vibes. And I was wondering if you could talk about how you have a company that has a very singular vibe in each region, but also sort of adapts to the region that it's within, because I think that's something that could expand to many different types of businesses, not just SoulCycle working out.
Right, and I think that's a really good question. So one of the things that happened that we realized early on was that, let's just take New York, for example. I don't know how many people know Manhattan, but like the Upper West Side likes classic rock. And that should not come as a surprise to anybody. But downtown, people want to hear, they want to hear the top 100s, right? And they don't want to hear the exact ones that you hear on the radio. They want to hear bootleg stuff that came from somebody's friend, who's somebody's friend, got it from the studio. They want the cool music. So you have to figure out a way to deliver to people, to your customer, what they want to receive. So that it does take some active listening. And it doesn't take long, because people tell you, I hated that class because they played house music the whole time. Why don't people play good music? Oh, what's good music? And then they tell you. And then you give it to them, and then it works out. So that is one of the things that we did do. And I think that contributes to the vibe. So I don't know exactly how that would pertain to other businesses off the top of my head, but I agree. I think different parts of the country have different desires and stuff that they want to hear. Even when they're urban or suburban, or we don't have any rural studios, but you have to really meet people where they are. Thank you for that.
Hi, thank you for coming. So when you started in 2006, mobile phones and online platforms weren't huge yet.
Yeah.
So how did you gain such a following that was so organic that almost 10 years later you still have that following?
Well, this is a question I really have for you guys, because what is going on out there is just so noisy. So what we did was, like, for example, when Twitter started, some band in Brooklyn had the Twitter handle @SoulCycle. Thank you very much. So I figured out how to get it from them. And then when we started using Twitter, we responded to every tweet. And businesses, like the bigger businesses, were not, and everybody does that now, but people weren't doing that then. People weren't taking the time to respond to each person's thing. So what was happening was somebody couldn't get in a class, and they would tweet at the Soul Fairy, and then the Soul Fairy would figure out how to make things happen for them. So we really used social media to serve our customers, and we had a very high penetration of, I don't know what the language is, it's just so embarrassing because you guys probably know all this stuff, but regardless, yes, you're right. People really did connect with SoulCycle on social media, and it was because we used it to serve. And I feel like everybody's doing that now, so I don't know how you differentiate, except to say, don't patronize the people that you're talking to. Give them exactly what they need, and if you can't give them exactly what they need, give them part of what they need. And I think that is that's what turns people into evangelists.
Hi, so thank you for coming. I wanted to ask you about your competition, specifically how you dealt with that, because there are a lot of copycats out there. So I wanted to see how you worked through that and how you competed against them.
Yeah, so I firmly believe that we do not have any competition, that our only competition is ourselves. And I was always very underwhelmed by what I saw out there in terms of competition. I wanted somebody to come up with something that was really competitive, and I never saw that. That is my narrative, okay? That's one part of my narrative. The second part of my narrative is that we have a huge problem in this country, okay? We're feeding ourselves stuff that is not good for us, and we all know it, and we all got to burn it off or figure out how to engage in something that's going to keep us physical. And if somebody's doing that across the street, God bless them. Because everybody's got to get well. I really don't care how it happens. This is not just about SoulCycle. Of course, I wanted everybody to be at SoulCycle, but like I said, everything rises. And I also think health and wellness is a super new frontier. So to the extent that, I think in some ways fitness is getting kind of crowded, but I also think this is something, it's a total lifestyle change. My parents' workout was smoking and cocktails. So that's a huge paradigm shift in 40 years, right? That's not our workout. We actually work out now. And people have much more awareness of health and wellness. So I know I was being cheeky about your answer about competition. What I said is actually true, but I knew exactly what the competition was doing. It doesn't mean that I didn't look at it, but I didn't believe it was our competition. And I really believed that. I didn't just read that in a book. And I don't know why I believed that, but that was just really true for me. So that's a kind of a little bit of an arrogant place to come from, but it makes it really quiet. So you should try that.
What made you decide to sell the company rather than do an IPO yourself?
Yeah, so we had sold majority of the company in 2010 after the market had collapsed, and we were trying to figure out, we were getting a lot of phone calls for money, and we were getting the wrong kind of phone calls. And like my lawyer always says, money, not all money is the same color green. And so it just was a very different climate than it is right now, to be perfectly honest with you. And so we felt that it was a better strategic decision to take a partner who was a strategic partner, that we could scale the business. And the IPO decision was their decision about to do it. So we really couldn't have taken the company public. There's a lot of other stuff that happened that I can't really talk about, but suffice it to say that we had tried to prepare the company for the possibility of that happening, and I think it would have been interesting, actually. I think SoulCycle, yeah, it could have been really interesting. We were going to go public. I bought a jacket for the IPO, and I still have it. It's fantastic, but I never got to wear it at the NASDAQ. Oh no, I guess we were going to New York Stock Exchange, but regardless, I never got to. I wear it, but not for that.
Thank you for coming. I had a question about sort of like mindfulness in business. Seems like you're a really spiritual person who brings a lot of mindfulness into business. I was wondering like what specifically you do to like stay sane and stay connected, and then also what you recommend to the new businesses you work with to help them build mindful businesses.
You know, I think you have to just like work all day long, so it's nice to be mindful. I know people that like close their door and meditate at work for 20 minutes, and I'm like, what business are you in that you get to do that during the day? They're like in money management in New York. Yeah, okay, fine. What we did, which I actually thought was great, is we would have, once we started having people in a lot of different time zones and cities, we would have a group meeting once a month. And people would Skype in, and everybody from the office would be there. Everybody locally would obviously get together. And we started every meeting with 3 minutes of silence. We used to call it the longest 3 minutes of the month because it really lasted a long time. But it was fantastic because it reminded all of us that meditation was something relevant in the world. So for people who wanted to opt into that, they could remind themselves that that was something they wanted to opt into. But it also kind of got everybody on the same, I guess, plane. So it's a really easy thing to do. And a friend of mine who started Today's Ticks, because go to New York and you want to go to the theater, it's a fantastic app. You get discounted Broadway tickets. It's really, really cool. And he's built a pretty impressive company. They're actually all over, they're global now. And they do it now. And he's like, it's fantastic. People love it. So that's the only other data point that I have is just from them.
Thank you for coming. So I'm just wondering, have you considered international expansion since the questions that happen in this country happens in some other countries, and there's like tons of opportunity out there. For example, like China.
Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunity out there. I think, so I mean, SoulCycle can still do that. SoulCycle, we had just had a lot of work to do in the United States, and now SoulCycle's open in Canada, and there's been a plan for a few years in London. I think that'll happen. And as far as China is concerned, I don't know, but what I do think is to your point of competition and copycats in the red t-shirt, there are some interesting things going on internationally. And I don't know if SoulCycle will get there internationally, but it certainly could. The thing is, like, everybody likes music, right? I mean, it doesn't matter where you're from, you like music. Everybody likes pop music, except for on the Upper West Side, they just like rock and roll, but that's cool, I like that too. But so there's a right for the company to be in a lot of different markets, and hopefully someday it'll get there.
Okay, coming around.
Uh-huh.
Sold it to eBay, and there was a little bit of disagreement, and actually he was forced out by his partner, then they sold it. He didn't sign a non-compete, so he went and started the exact same thing in Europe called Gaga. And it was like most of it, so there's a place where you take your idea and go to the market.
And that's actually really important. There's always any bad thing that ever happened at SoulCycle, and there was plenty of crazy things that happened, there's always a silver lining. I bet he wasn't too happy when that happened, but then when he read his non-compete, he was pretty psyched and moved to Europe. Right, or read his contract.
Hi, thank you for coming. And kind of going off that, actually, what would you say was the biggest setback you guys had, and also the biggest mistake you guys made?
Yeah, so we in, I think it was, yeah, 2014, we had hired this very famous company to redo our website, and they totally whiffed it. And we had 7 people, and this is not just on one bike, this is across the portfolio, 20,000 people riding a day. 7 people booked on one bike, like 7 people for bike 7 at 9:30, 7 human beings on one bike, right? 7 human beings who wanted that exact bike. 7 human beings that were super pissed. And so we had to turn our office into a call center for 3 months. And we called it Tech Crisis 2014, and it was terrible. And that is the one thing that happened at SoulCycle that I have yet to find a silver lining about. There were lots of other things that we found a silver lining about, but not that. That was awful. It haunts me to this day, as you can tell. So learn to code. Everybody learn to code.
Hi, thank you for coming. So you mentioned that your academic background was not a business degree, that you studied some other things, like did a gap semester in India and all of that, had a very spiritual background. So how do you think that benefited you going into the business world?
Well, I grew up with entrepreneurs, and I grew up around people who were in business. So it wasn't something that I had never seen. I think if you have never seen something, then you can't know that. So I have to just come clean and say, like, I did really like have that around me. And I like business. I mean, I've always liked that. So that is definitely like part of who I am. But I think that the more, I guess, atypical route that I took allowed me, to like really fill my cup before I started this business, so that I would have the tenacity and energy and drive and desire to really make it happen, is number one. And number two is to like be able to like take care of people along the way, to like nurture them and to try to get into somebody else's world. Because when people are in pain, if you can get into their world, I mean, there's plenty of studies about this, like it allows their reptilian brains to relax so that they can get into a more creative, like forward-thinking brain. And to me, like that's what moves the company forward. So I think that my interest in those sorts of things certainly did matter. And the thing is, like, people want to work with human beings. People don't want to work with robots. And the more humanity that we can adopt, I mean, just the better life is. And we spend a lot of time at work.
Thank you.
Hi, so I'm not sure if you kind of covered this really in depth, but what was the moment and what was the catalyst when you guys decided, hey, we should be doing a rave while people are, spinning? Because I went to a class and the atmosphere was really unreal and I wasn't expecting it. So I was kind of curious how that came to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like if you need to go to, when did we decide that we should have a rave? Like, who doesn't want to have a rave in the morning? It's fun, right? And you only go for 45 minutes, so you get it done. You don't have to stay for 3 hours. You don't have to do things you wish you hadn't done. You just go there, and it's super healthy, and you leave, and you're all happy, and you can go on with the rest of your day. It just made sense. The time, I'll tell you, the raviest experience that I saw, believe it or not, happened in I guess you would believe this, in Long Island, in our Woodbury studio, which I did not expect. The riders brought in that Dayglow body paint. Have you guys ever seen that? I had never seen that. I had never even heard of it. And we had the glow sticks and stuff. Like the glow sticks, I guess, were last year. So they had all like painted their body. You can't see the stuff until you go into the black light. Anyway, these guys started doing it, and it really was crazy. Like the energy was off the hook. And yes, so that like took the raves to the next level of body paint, which is pretty cool. So I'm glad you had that experience. That's good. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for coming. I was just wondering if you ever considered expanding it outside of just cycling into like other workouts, Pilates or something.
We had really thought about that, and we just had so much work to do with cycling. And we also kind of started to think about, I don't know, like there's not that many ways to get cardio. So we wanted to really be good at one thing. So we didn't do Pilates. There's some great people doing Pilates out there. Really, really great. And I've recently been boxing with this guy who's a Marine, and it is fun to hit things. So there's lots of things to do out there.
How did SoulCycle originally acquire their first users? And then as you expand to different cities, how did you guys go about that?
So that's a great question. So our first users, you know what, some were our friends, but mostly it was just like random people who found us and who fell in love with it and who brought people back. And I have an immense amount of gratitude for those people. And as we got to new cities, it was really interesting. As things started sort of happening in New York, this is like, what we realized was that like friends were telling their sisters and sort of just people were telling their friend groups and their relatives about SoulCycle. So as we got to new markets, we would find sort of the influencers through our friend networks. And we would meet them, and they would bring 10 friends, and they would bring 10 friends, and they would bring 10 friends, and that is how we would start to seed these new markets. And Julie and I would go, and we would hang out with these people, and we would ride with them, and we would help them get whatever they need, whether it was passes or swag or stuff for their school's auction or whatever it was. And that's how we built brand awareness in those communities.
Best form of marketing. What's the best form of marketing for any business? Word of mouth.
Word of mouth, right? You don't pay. They had the analog version of a viral loop, right? So we talked about a viral loop. A viral loop is when, for an online business, you're not leaving.
Oh, okay.
I was just getting that away.
I will be staying here.
They had the viral loop in the analog version, where she said, like, who didn't hear of SoulCycle from someone else? All right, you didn't see any advertisement. You just saw someone else told you about it. And so from one member, paying customer, they probably acquired 3, 5. They have the metrics on it, I'm sure. So the same thing it's very rare to get, where you get one person that pays you and then brings you 6, 8 other people. It doesn't happen very often. When you do it, that's when you sort of get lightning.
Hi, thank you again so much for coming. I think the professor brought up something that I've been very interested in, which is the fact that you build such a remarkable family at SoulCycle, and everyone's so tightly knit in the first 2 rows. How did you go about kind of confronting the challenge of maintaining and growing that kind of tight-knit family and tribe?
You know, a lot of it was kind of, it's funny, when you said that, it reminded me of something that I wanted to share, which I'll tell you in a second. I think you have to serve the people that are walking through your front door, and since they're walking through your front door, it's really not that hard to serve them. If you can't do that, like, that's pretty pathetic. So we really worked hard to do that, make sure everybody stayed happy. And then, you know, I always sort of wonder about because I'm a back row rider. So I always wondered about that person in the back row, right? And that person who maybe wasn't part of like what had become kind of cliquey. I don't like cliques. I think those are super annoying. But obviously, once you build community, those things are going to happen. So we really trained the people at the front desk to make connections. So like somebody would get to know me and they would say, oh, Elizabeth, I heard you just joined a curling club and so-and-so's son is a curler at University blah, 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 whatever, and kind of connect the dots. And so they would find a way to connect me to somebody that I didn't know in the room that would make me feel much more connected to the people who were there and like know somebody. And so we would always play that game in training about how to connect the dots for people inside of the studios, and that's what we did. Does that sound creepy? It worked really well. People liked it. But now as I was saying it, I was like, does that sound weird? But
Speaking of curling, when did you start?
I know. I had to bring up curling.
She's a curler.
I am not a curler. I joined when we went to Telluride, Growth Mindset. Somebody invited me to be on the local curling team. I didn't even know what curling was, and my kids shamed me into going, and so I went, and it was really awesome, and I'm really grateful to them because I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun, and now it's so popular. I feel so like ahead of the curve.
You were before the Olympic medal.
Are you standing up? Should I stand up?
No, sit down for a second. We'll ask one more question,
okay.
And then I want the students to sort of give us some feedback. So you're on sabbatical. How long is this going to last?
Well,
open-ended. It's a sabbatical.
Yeah, Nina says we're going back to school in September. She and her sister are going to school at the kitchen table, and they spend a lot of time with their parents, and it's time for them to be with other kids, but they've been really good sports about this. I would go on a lot longer if it were up to me, but out of respect for their mental well-being, we will be back in New York in September, enrolled in school.
And will there be travel before then? Where are you guys
Yeah,
gonna
we
go?
are. We are going. We've had a great time, and we're going to continue. We're going to Ecuador in April. There are some crazy people I know from Telluride who. This is the best image. If they could have invented Burning Man, they would have. And they do these amazing like theater programs with kids, and my kids don't know them, and I've known them for years. And so the girls are going to go do a homestay and a theater program with these people. And my husband and I are going to travel and backpack, and then we're going on a boat through the Galapagos.
Oh, beautiful.
We're living the dream.
Good for you. So what sort of inspires and colors your next decisions or the next part of your life? Is it not thought out yet? And sort of figure it out?
It goes to the calling. It really goes to the calling. For now, I'm really enjoying working with entrepreneurs. I like being a bat phone for people who just want a person to call. And I like doing that. And then if I can figure out how to deliver like a powerful, secular, uncheesy way for people to connect and bond with people that has nothing to do with fitness, and I might do that. Or I might not. We'll see.
For you.
I don't know.
We're going to think about ways that to keep you close to USC without a lot of.
This is fantastic. I know we started out talking about this. I'm excited for you guys. This is a cool place. It really is.
It's a great time to be them. It's a great time to be at USC. But we'll figure out ways that to send you some businesses and some things for you to think about. And they don't have to be student business, they can be alumni businesses and things like that. I want to ask the students, because I heard so many great things to take away from your talk. And so I want to ask them, it's the last class before spring break, going to put your mind in neutral a little bit, go away and do some fun things. Be careful, be smart, come back, do all those things that are important. But I want you to share what lessons or advice or takeaways you have from the talk today. And I'm going to record this. And this is for Julie, who couldn't make it.
Oh,
so
great.
let's
She'll
do this
love
for
that.
Julie and Elizabeth. All right, who's got things to share? All right, hands up, hands up. All right, go.
So have a closely knit team with diverse skill sets by a united vision.
Entrepreneurship is a calling. Get dirty.
Get dirty, that's a good one. Laura?
When you start something, it starts in your heart.
Meet people where they are.
Have fun while you're doing it.
It just made sense.
If you can't give people exactly what they want, you're part of it.
All right, coming around the side.
Cursing is a sign of intelligence.
Coming up.
Your business is your calling.
Unconscious cues get you places.
Over here. In the middle.
The more humanity we can adopt and adapt, the better.
Did I miss anybody? Up top, loud.
Not the gym business, but the hospitality business.
Good lens, good lens. Let's thank Elizabeth Cutler.